So now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters, Ann Rollins and Tom Pizer. Ann is a Senior Instructional Designer for GP's Learning Solutions Group. She has over 20 years of experience developing learning for global companies. She designs and develops instructor-led, virtual, web-based, and blended learning solutions. She also leads and conducts global learning needs, assessments, and learning strategy development for her clients. She enjoys educating others on the value of including micro and social learning, subject matter expert enablement, and mobile learning components as part of our clients' learning ecosystems. Tom Pizer is Director of Learning Technologies for GP's Learning Solutions Group. He also has over 20 years of experience in the technical digital media field. Tom leads the team of programmers and engineers that build many of our interactive e-learning solutions for clients. A key aspect of Tom's responsibilities includes staying abreast of emerging technologies and in tune with the latest development methodologies, standards, and practices. So with that, Ann, I'm going to go ahead and turn presenter rights over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Just a quick look at our agenda. So in this session, we'll discuss why we need to contextualize the learning experience. As learning professionals, we often hear about mobile learning and the evolution moving a lot of our learning that happens in place in an office into a mobile environment. But a lot of the mobile learning that's out there really it refers to the mobility of the learner and isn't necessarily affixed to a specific physical location. And we'll talk about how beacon-based learning solutions can change that paradigm a bit. We'll talk about what beacon technology is and the common uses today that you might be familiar with. We'll talk about how beacon-based learning solutions can address some points of failure in traditional learning solutions that we create today. And then we'll also talk about the components of a beacon solutions architecture. So let's go ahead and dig in. So most learning solutions fail to meet our employees where they are in their learning journeys for a lot of reasons. You know, there's cognitive overload. We're slamming them with tons of information at one time that we expect them to be able to recall at the moment of need. There are knowledge and skills gaps, again, in that moment of need. So I've left my learning experience and maybe my resources and tools are back at my workstation, and that's not where I am when I need to be able to recall or access them. And then there are information access issues as well. Each of these problems prevent employees and teams from performing their very best. They do have a major impact on productivity. And so we're looking at a possibility for a solution to contextualize learning, which will provide content in the moment of need in the space where people need it the most. We've just got to find a way to get the learning to people where they are. And beacon-based learning solutions definitely provide a way for us to do that. So moving into our technical piece of the conversation, Tom, let's start with a high-level overview of the technology and how it works.
Absolutely. So first, question, what are beacons? Beacons are small devices that can be placed in a geographic location, and they just broadcast a signal waiting for a mobile device to pass within their field of influence or their field of view. So when Ann's talking about contextual learning, what is contextual learning? Instead of the training being pushed to the learner is going to the geographic location where the training happens to be. Beacon technology was introduced by Apple in 2013, back with iOS 7, so it's actually it's not actually a new technology, even though it's new to the learning spectrum. Beacons are small. They're about 3 inches big. They can fit right in your hand, and as you can see by the photo there, they can be easily placed in a location in a facility or in a museum, et cetera. They transmit a unique ID, so each beacon can uniquely identify itself, so the program on your mobile device knows exactly where you are by beacon ID. Beacons are inexpensive. They run anywhere from about $30 to $100 per device, and the more you get, you know, the larger the bulk, larger the volume, the cheaper they become. And then beacons are self-contained. They have an onboard battery that has a lifespan that can be in a matter of months, depending on how frequently and how powerfully you send out a signal, to a number of years. And you can also get beacons that are hardwired, so you have to worry less about maintenance. So how do beacons work? Beacons emit, like we were saying, beacons emit a signal continuously. The first thing is that a beacon needs to be placed near a point of interest. So you may have multiple beacons inside of a single geographic location. Once you've placed it inside of a point of interest, that learner or that employee is going to need to download an application to their mobile device that is beacon aware, and that it needs to know that it needs to be looking for a certain set of beacons that have a certain device ID. When the learner or the employee gets within range of one of the beacons are transmitting a signal density or a signal strength. And so the mobile device knows when it's within very near, or far proximity from the beacons. That way you're able to kind of pick out where they're at. The mobile device then takes over, or the mobile application takes over and performs the function that it's intended to do. That may be to go out and look for some e-learning. It may be to go out and get a specific piece of information. So how are beacons being used today? Currently, naturally, the commercial workplace has taken to using them. So they're currently being used for affinity, loyalty points. So if I download my baseball stadium application on my mobile device, I may be able to purchase my tickets, and then when I get to the ballpark, might be able to automatically recognize that I'm near a gate entrance, get inside of the gate. As I pass by points of interest, I may be given information on those points of interest. And by going to loyalty places inside of the ballpark, I may get coupons or points off. Where they're being used in learning is museums are beginning to use them, to place them in specific rooms or points of interest to provide additional supplemental information. So I may be next to a painting that has some additional information, not only on the artist, but perhaps I might also get involved in going through an interactive exercise to learn more. And how we're beginning to use them at GP Strategies in learning is we've already begun to incorporate them into scavenger hunts, but they can also be used for activities that are along the lines of geocaching or group-sponsored activities, which we have done with scavenger hunts. And then finally, we're looking at options for performance support and follow-up training. So, for example, if a learner happens to be within a commercial workspace, we may put a beacon near an object that requires updated safety training. And so, as that learner gets closer to that object, the mobile device can then say, okay, I recognize you're close to this object, go out, check your training record, make sure that you've got your safety training up to date, or make sure that you've got the startup procedures for that device. So when we're talking about contextualizing that e-learning, we're really talking about meeting that learner at the point of need.
Great, thanks, Tom, for that overview. Segueing into using beacon technology in our learning solutions in the workplace, Tom mentioned a couple of different examples of how it's starting to appear, but really the challenge that we're facing every day is people forgetting what they are supposed to have learned almost right after they learn it. And so we look at this forgetting curve, which is based on Ebbinghouse's research nearly 100 years ago on learning and recall. And we know the longer the gap between learning and use or review, the more people forget. And the latency in between those periods of learning and use really create performance gaps, particularly for people who have to perform out in the field. Beacon technology can provide a bridge for that gap, enabling learning assets to be made available in the physical context where our learners need them most. So let's talk about these learning moments of need. By implementing a contextual beacon-based solution that allows learners to access what they need when they need it, we can circumvent some of that forgetting curve. And really the right beacon-based mobile learning solution could mean no more LMS or SharePoint phishing expeditions that usually happens after the need has come and gone. And in the moment, the need remained unfulfilled. At GP Strategies, we frame a lot of our learning solutions around Mosher and Gottfried's 5 moments of learning need. Let's take a quick look at them. And then we'll talk about where we envision the beacon-based learning solutions making a difference along each of these points. So really, as learning professionals, we think about people need to learn or do something for the first time. Another moment, they need to learn to do more of something. They need to apply and refine. There are times that they need to adjust to change when things don't go the way they expect, and then when reacting when something fails or when something goes wrong. And so for addressing that, learning things for the first time, beacon-based learning solutions are ideal for onboarding or new product training. Truly, you can place a beacon in different places in a work environment and have specific content that the app is going to push to a device. You could have video, multimedia, you could have a SharePoint site open, lots of different opportunities there. For new product training, again, learning things for the first time, being able to make content fresh and available to a wide number of people very quickly. For that second moment, doing more. Think about practical in the space skills. If you have a warehouse environment where you have skills that are building and extending on one another, where someone might learn to use a piece of equipment in one way, and then after they've been checked out, they're able to use that piece of equipment in a different way, and being able to provide those learning assets that support that need. Beacon-based learning solutions can also support practical assessments on assimilation of physical skills. So for instance, if I needed to be able to check out on 3 or 4 pieces of equipment and answer an assessment item based on what I have just completed there, beacon-based learning solutions can definitely capture those assessment pieces of information using assessment items, and obviously the mobile app will assess correct, incorrect, and that can be written back to the LMS. For applying and refining, a job aid for advanced skills, say using a piece of equipment, I use that in that do more, but being able to perform finer and higher level skills. Certainly roles, there are role partitions that can be created. So if you have someone who is a frontline person in a manufacturing environment, and then you have a team leader, and then you have someone in a more advanced role, being able to partition the types of assets that each person has access to. Adjusting to change. For changes in process or product or any other content piece, you can swap out content quickly. With the beacon-based learning solution, there's an administrative interface that is developed hand in glove with that mobile app. And so it's easy to move content and change content as our processes change. And in many organizations, just to be able to have the right content available to lots of people very quickly is a real challenge that beacons can address. And then reacting to change, troubleshooting and escalating processes and tools. Again, there are typically in the work environment, there may be people who are performing in that base frontline skill, and when something goes wrong, there's a different person who handles the escalation of that. And so those kinds of processes and resources and tools could be made available right in the space that they need them. For instance, fixing a machine that is on a manufacturing floor. So your call to action, I'd love to see, we've got a question in the Q&A pane there, but I'd like for folks to share in why don't we can use the chat pane for that, or the Q&A pane, that's fine. Think about the work that you're doing today. Where could you see application for a beacon-based learning solution in your own environment? I'd love to see your thoughts on that. We've got one suggestion, new hire onboarding. For product launches, have a beacon positioned by a new product. Excellent. That's an excellent application, particularly for a remote sales force that might be called in to do training on lots of products. If the product portfolio changes on a regular basis or incremental basis, and people need to come in and learn about a lot of new products at one time and be able to capture the resources and to be able to, I think about maybe in vehicle sales, being able to be positioned within a vehicle and have instructor guides or job aids or manuals on the new features that were not previously available. Do we have others? New hire onboarding, manufacturing new floor equipment, placing beacons on machines, allowing users to download step-by-step job aids, excellent. Procedures near controls for plant equipment, off-site training, office where people travel. In an office where people travel, this is, it's more of a performance support application, but I think about in some of our international clients where they have very offices that are located throughout the world, and each of those offices have marketing and sales and customer care and many different functions that are performed in different places. When these people travel, say, from Italy to Brazil, wouldn't it be great if I was a marketing employee and I walked in and my device was able to push, where's the SharePoint site that I need to direct to be able to find local market assets for my role now that I'm in a different, physical location? Because we think about when we're traveling, how much time is lost just trying to get a lay of the land when you're going to visit an office space. That was an excellent suggestion.
Yep, and it looks like a lot of these suggestions and ideas are along the same lines of some of the conversations that we've been having internally. Just-in-time performance support, I like that new hire onboarding really matches up to some of the things that we've been talking about and, meeting that just-in-time training requirement.
For sure. And putting that learning in the space where they need it at the time that they need it. And as I know that we're coming up on the end of our time together, but I'd like for all of you, as you leave the session, to think about, for your own purposes, what co-located audiences could benefit from a beacon-based learning solution? So people who, in the example that I described, we have an office in Europe and an office in Asia and an office in the States, and people travel to them, and they have specific needs and struggles, challenges that are just not being met with the tools and systems we have in place. I'm also thinking about what remote on-the-move audiences could benefit. So thinking about your sales force, thinking about your, your technology folks who are going out and putting together demo solutions for their clients or for your clients, and need to be able to have quick access to really important information. Another keen use of this is for the trainer who travels to different locations, being able to have all of their learning material on a beacon device that they actually take with them and put in a classroom so that they don't have a ton of setup and a ton of access that needs to happen for their students to be prepared to come into class. Well, great. I think that about wraps us up. I'd love to go ahead and transition over to our question and answer time that we've got.
Thanks, Ann and Tom. That was a great presentation. You've certainly, I think, given everybody, including myself, a lot to think about. So this does bring us to the end of the 20-minute presentation, and we'll go ahead and move into our Q&A portion. There have been a number of questions that have come in, but if you do have a question for Ann or Tom, be sure to enter it into the Q&A module at this time. That's found in the lower right-hand panel of WebEx. We obviously covered a lot in 20 minutes, and there's still a lot to discuss, so we do encourage you to continue the conversation with our presenters beyond today's session. We will make sure that their contact info is available on the slide deck, and we will make sure to send everybody a link to a follow-up blog post where they'll be addressing the key takeaways for today, including any Q&A that we may not get to due to time. I would also like to remind everybody that the recording and the slides from today will be sent to the email address you provided. So it does look like we have a few questions coming in. I'm just going to kind of filter these back to make sure I don't miss any. Let's see here. The first one is, will this work with, does this work with tablets? Do iBeacons work with tablets?
Absolutely it does. Oh, go ahead, Tom. You take it away.
Oh, I was just going to say, absolutely, same thing, absolutely. It is part of the iOS specification, so as far as Apple products go, it'll work on both tablets and smartphones that are capable of iOS, I think it was iOS 7 and above. And that also have the Bluetooth LE, if I'm going to get super technical, capability. So your iPad 2 or later.
Great, thanks. So the next question is, how would you compare beacon technology-driven training versus geofencing-driven training?
I'm not familiar with geofencing-driven training. I think, Tom, I'm going to let you take that from a technical perspective.
Yep. So as far as geofencing, got a little bit less information on that, but it basically is a geofencing type of product. That is, that it is assisting you with identifying a geographic location within a space. The great thing about beacons is that they are not necessarily limited to a Wi-Fi within an infrastructure, or if I've got a mobile device, they are not dependent on necessarily on my mobile device having Wi-Fi or connectivity. So for example, when you go into a Best Buy, the idea behind geofencing is that you're able to, through geo-positioning inside of there, be able to identify where someone is. In this particular case, because the beacons are independent and because they're continuously broadcasting a signal, they're not dependent on that, that continuous connection. They are simply dependent on an application on your device recognizing a Bluetooth location. The technologies are similar in how you use them, but the beacons are not necessarily dependent on a continuous online connection.
Great. We've got quite a few coming in, so I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to all of them. I'm going to go ahead and go through probably 3 or 4 more if you guys are okay staying on the line for a few more minutes. So the next one is, can I send information from the user's device back to an LMS to track which beacons they visited?
The answer is yes. If you know what the beacon device IDs are, which you would know from the mobile application, at that point the mobile application takes over. So the communication between the mobile device and, say, an LMS or some other human capital management system would simply be a communication then between that person's application and those back-end resources. The beacon itself is just providing a signal and letting the device know, hey, you're near this object. So yeah, the device itself, or I should say the application itself, can go ahead and kind of mark off, yep, you've seen X number of beacons. That's how we did the scavenger hunt activities that we built. We recognized the beacon IDs and we kind of marked them off as being complete.
Great. The next one I'm going to go through is, oh, I just lost it. Can anybody access the info on a beacon, or is there a way to protect the information to only certain users? This is a great question.
It's actually a very important question, and it comes up when we're talking about security. So the beacons themselves don't house any information. They don't transmit any of the user data back and forth. All they're doing is they're just a signal that's saying, I'm a beacon, here's my ID, and you are approximately this far away, and that's it. At that point, it just comes down to the mobile device, the mobile application, how it securely handles communication back to a backend. So you have to be concerned about the security of that application as much as you have to be concerned about Facebook's security of your information. It's along those same lines.
Right. And I know you touched on this a little bit, but is content held locally on a remote device or server? I know you mentioned some course materials, and if it is local, to what kind of capacity?
I'm sorry, could you read that question one more time?
The content for, I assume the content that's held for the applications, is that held locally on a remote device, or is that through a server? You mentioned some course materials, so where is
So it could be either. It could be compiled into an application on that user's device, and all of the content and all the data could be on that compiled application. It could access a mobile-friendly web page, and it could also access resources that are in the cloud. So it just depends on how you want to architect the solution. The local application on the user's device is simply just being made aware of the beacon's presence. At that point, you can, the mobile application can take any form, either locally compiled or web connected.
Okay, we're going to hit, I'll probably just do one more, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I know we're about 7 minutes over. So if we did not get to your question, don't worry. We'll be making sure that both Ann and Tom take a look at all of the questions, and we'll be addressing them in that follow-up blog post, where we'll have some key takeaways as well as a link to the recording and the slide deck. So one more question. I'm trying to understand how this can be helpful for field salespeople that never work from the office. Do you have any suggestions?
Can you repeat that question? My apologies.
Yeah, this person is trying to understand how this can be helpful for their field salespeople that never work from the office.
That's a good question. And, Yvette had a really good mention earlier in the Q&A listing about using iBeacons as almost like a learning station, say at a national sales meeting. I'd have to put some thought around that for field salespeople who are probably going client to client. Probably not necessarily for the field sales person's own learning, but very likely for them to take a lot of their material with them on the road. That's the application I see there. Whereas if they're not situated or going back to a home office where they would have access to that, they currently are using some type of a solution where they're learning on the go. And just the nature of how the beacons work probably isn't necessarily a ready application for that audience in that way. Does that make sense?
I think so, and I think that, too, we can probably elaborate on it even a little bit more if needed in that blog post. And so we're approaching 8 minutes after our live session, so I do want to go ahead and wrap things up. We'll be sure to send that blog post and the recording to everybody on the call. I just want to say thank you again to our speakers, and thanks to everyone who attended for your time and attention. We do hope that you join us again for our next Learning Trends webinar on how to take advantage of learning technology trends in 2016. This will be on February 4th at 2 p.m., and then we will have a final Learning Trends session on February 9th, and this is actually going to be hosted with ATD and Don Duquette, our Vice President of Learning Solutions, and he will be going through our entire Learning Trends series and kind of touching on all of the different learning trends that we've hit on during this series, and we hope that you can join us for one of those sessions or one of our future sessions. So for GP Strategies, I'm Kayla Ross, and I wish everyone a great day.